Welcome to the Media Cat Magazine podcast. I'm your host, Mike Pigger, editor at the magazine. And for today's pod, I'd like to welcome Glenn Fisher. Glenn is an author, copywriter, and speaker. His book, The Art of the Click, was shortlisted for a Business Book of the Year award. He's also created a copywriting podcast, All Good Copy, and is co-founder of The Fix, a project by copywriters for copywriters. Welcome, Glenn.
Hello. Thank you for the introduction.
How was it? Was it accurate?
It was pretty much accurate. It was pretty much there. I've got that natural English Hugh Grant kind of grow up in the 90s, early noughties that I just naturally am kind of like, me? Who, me? These things? People introducing me always makes me laugh, but yeah.
I mean, I stole most of those lines off your website, so, you know.
I know, I recognize a few. You didn't say I was the world's greatest copywriter or something, which I think I've got as a testimonial somewhere. But, that will make its way into the world at some point. But yeah, no, it's a pleasure to be here, Mike.
How's your year going? We were talking off mic about you having computer issues, but that aside, how's the rest of the year going?
Apart from computer issues, my year has been a very wonderful, lovely one, apart from computer issues throughout it, basically, and really technical problems. But technical problems are not such a bad thing. It's been really interesting year. I've done quite a lot. It's been a weird year for me in the sense that, just from a personal point of view, I've kind of started a few businesses and kind of gone from so I went from being an in-house copywriter to being a freelance copywriter about 5 years ago. And then this year has been a development from being a kind of freelance copywriter to being more of a kind of business kind of guy. So kind of going to those slightly, well, yes, bigger in scope of what you do. Obviously, as a freelancer, you are essentially linked to your time, and I'm kind of transitioning to a place where I help other copywriters and have other business interests. So it's been an interesting, weird, like quite learning based year for me, learning new things.
You sort of extended your brand then, so to speak.
Yes, that is one way of looking at it.
Extended the core.
I have extended my brand. I've doubled myself in the sense that I work with a business partner on The Fix, the copywriter called Nick O'Connor. And yeah, so you mentioned about the All Good Copy podcast that I launched. Probably, I did that. Oh, I'm not great on chronology, but I did that maybe for, let's say, I started that about 5 years ago, and I ran that for about 2 years. And that was a big creative outlet for me at the time. I wanted to interview copywriters and do all that kind of thing, but I blended it with my own kind of creativity. I did a lot of parodies on the advertising world and what have you, and spent a lot of creative energy on that. And then after, I think I did about 36, coming up to 40-ish episodes. And then there was a combination of things that stopped that. I was trying to write a novel, and I realized I could only kind of, aside from work, only like use my creativity to such an extent and focus on one project. I couldn't give All Good Copy the stuff I needed for it to be as good quality as I wanted it to be. So I focused on the novel. But at the same time, I wanted to shift the podcast to be entirely in person. Which I chose to do just as COVID hit. So it was just a kind of a big mangle of a mess that stopped that. And I focused on writing my novel as my main creative outlet for a while, aside from still writing copy in the kind of day job. But then came back into it, and rather than everything kind of aligned that Nick was in a similar place. So we put all of our efforts into this new project called The Fix, which has that same element as what the podcast had. We interview copywriters and people involved in the industry, but we also have added a kind of level of worst salesman ever for a copywriter, but a level of educational stuff where we're educating other copywriters, sharing our experience and doing all that kind of stuff. And that's out of that has grown all of these other things like Fix Fest, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And we have a membership group, we have an academy with copywriting students and stuff like that. And we're just launching boot camps next year where people come in and spend some intensive time with us and stuff like that. So that's how that all grew, and that's how I've kind of shifted in my perception of just being a kind of lone gunman sat in his bedroom having technical issues trying to piece together a podcast. Now it's a slightly bigger operation.
Yeah, it sounds like it's grown. I don't even think last time we spoke you'd mentioned boot camps. So I added boot camps to the mix. It's going to
Yes,
be like a sort of.
we're doing a financial copywriting focused one in March, which we've got a lot of connections with big financial publishers. That's where my background is, both here in the UK and Australia and in the US. And so we're doing that because that's kind of our quote wheelhouse. I've never, Nick always says wheelhouse, so I mock him for it, but I've seemed to be using it now in my own thing. But we kind of know financial copywriting more so than we know other things. Certainly Nick still works exclusively in that world. I work in the branding world as well. But yeah, so we're focusing on that first. We've got a load of publishers from the US, from Australia, coming over as kind of special guests, but it's basically us in a room for a couple of days in London with wannabe copywriters who want to get into that industry, into that niche. We'll, rather than just being a meet and greet, we actually teach you, we show you how it works, break it down, review copy and all this kind of stuff. Everything about the fix can be boiled down to the fact that it comes down to actually reviewing and working live on copy rather than just the theory around things. What we try and do is put some copy up on the screen or up in the room and say, right, how would you improve it? How would you change this? So rather than the kind of philosophical things, which I love talking about, and the theory and what have you, and 10 ways to improve your headline and all this kind of abstract thought, we try and actually kind of put our money where our mouth is kind of thing and actually do what if exercises and suggest, well, what if it said this? What if it did this? How could we do that? And then that we've found that is one of the best ways to teach other copywriters how to improve their skill set.
It is actually like how I was thinking when you said boot camp. I was like thinking, like I'm a copywriter, get me out of here, and you sort of force feed them bad copy, basically. Make them swallow it.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, it's essentially what goes on. I mean, we'll try and force feed them like some animal testicles if we can, depending on how far it goes. But yeah, it's very much it's intensive, and we've got a bit of a for want of a better word, bantery kind of like alter egos where we joke and laugh and all this kind of stuff. I'm certainly the kind of silly comedy man in that respect. But when we get down to it, especially on the boot camp side of things, it's serious. We expect people to kind of roll the sleeves up and really get working on it. And certainly with the boot camp, our intention is to get people full-time gigs in the financial publishing industry. And we have a reputation ourselves to uphold with the publishers that we still work with today. We don't want to bring them people that we don't think are good enough, kind of thing. So it's an intense thing. It's when we get a bit more serious and a bit more Full Metal Jacket on it. But yeah, but it's still fun as well. I mean, I'm involved, so it's going to be slightly silly and random.
No, it makes sense. So far we've managed to touch on animal testicles and Full Metal Jacket. So I think we're doing really well. And
I mean, that's the scope, that's the spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably how our brains work, isn't it? When people that are involved with words, we like to pick out interesting words from time to time. I wanted to ask you about FixFest. You mentioned it once or twice.
Yep.
It happened not that long ago. How did this year's go? Was this year's the second one? And
no, this was the inaugural. Is that the right word?
Yeah. You did something before though, didn't you? A year ago? Or
I've done a few like live bits and pieces. But no, the one FixFest. When was it? Was it October? It's October. It's going to be October this year.
I think so.
I mean, I'm lost in time, but yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was towards the end of this year. It's first one ever. It ended up being about 200 copywriters in a crypt under a church in Clerkenwell. We had 13 guest speakers from all over the world. We had the likes of... so the other side of the fix that I've not kind of mentioned is, and it goes to my background, is I spent a long time, a decade or so, in direct response copywriting, doing long copy and all that kind of stuff, but then I branched out and went into the world of brands and above the line, whatever people want to define this stuff and would write slogans and billboards and stuff like that. So I've tried as much as possible to bring those worlds together, because I realize that there's stuff on the direct response side that people are doing very well, but there are also things that people ignore. And the same on the brand side, where people have their own rules and systems, but they ignore the stuff on the direct response side. So I was interested in blending those together. And FixFest turned out into be a very kind of physical representation of that. So we had giants from the direct response world, people like Mark Ford, who is an enormously successful businessman in America, who built his entire career on direct response marketing. But then on the other side of it, we had people like James Cross, the head of Meanwhile now, or co-founder, or whatever the title is, at BBC Creative, Steve Harrington, Rainey Robinson. So we had a big blend of people. And then they were the speakers. Me and Nick did a load of nonsense between. We wanted to make it more than just a conference, like a kind of boring how-to at the top of the stage kind of thing. So all of the talks were very much different. We had merch, we had stand-up poetry, we had a gospel choir open the day. It seemed appropriate. It was underneath the church, so we had a gospel choir, and it was generally a brilliant day. I can't describe how wonderful it was, and that's mainly thanks to the people who was there. It sounds very trite, but it was just a wonderful. It was like, consider. I mean, I've met most of the copywriters these days because I try and like do a lot of social events, but yeah, it was just a joyous kind of thing to see so many copywriters going, oh, I didn't realize you did that was there, that's how that worked, oh, that's I'm like that, and what have you. So it was just a lovely thing. We did a pub crawl afterwards, which we expected to be like a couple of people kind of following us around, but at one point we just had like 100 or so copywriters navigating their way through Clerkenwell, which was probably a health and safety issue, but it was wonderful to see. So we are going again this next year, depending when this goes out, but in 2024 we will, I think it's October the 3rd, we will be going for round 2, and we have even bigger and better things planned, which haunts me and frightens me, because it nearly did break us trying to organize it, but it was worth it in the end.
Is there just 2 of you that's organising this then? It sounds like a lot of stuff.
Yes, so it's me and Nick are the main thing, but it would be a miss of me to this. We've got other people behind the scenes helping us, kind of old friends from business. We've probably got a core team of about three or four people now, like, that help organize that stuff. Me and Nick are copywriters, and therefore most copywriters will recognize their inability to be serious and organize themselves. So we have people with those strengths helping us as well. But it's still a very small team. Without blowing my own trumpet, it's preposterous what we've been able to pull off with such a small team, with such like low funding, if you like, and what have you. But it's part of it. Kind of all goes back to our copywriting kind of mantra, which is like good copy should delight the reader and like bring them kind of unexpected pleasures. So we kind of try and do that with everything we do, and kind of push the boat out and trust that if we do that, then everything will pay back well in the end. So yeah, so we kind of pushed ourselves. We've hopefully learned stuff this time, so it won't be as slapdash in the sense of like me having like banners delivered to my house 2 days before, and then me climbing on the side of a church trying to like cable tie banners to things and blowing balloons up on the day. We will be slightly more organized and have a better clicker. That was one of the most annoying things of the day, but
Yeah, you'd be surprised. Like very well organized companies that run events, the stuff like that will happen all the time as well.
Yeah,
And you'll be trying to find some spare batteries or a thing. Like your event hangs on the need to find some string or something like that. It's
yeah.
ridiculous.
It was
Or
the
this whole
Dick
building's
Cheney,
going to fall down.
the
Um,
ghost of Dick Cheney, I think, was who was like the guy who was like the known unknowns and unknown knowns and all this kind of stuff. It was that element was I'd done so much prep. My partner Ruth was like, "Why is this all in the house? Like, why have you got these badges and stickers and what have you?" And she went, "You must have everything covered." And I went, "I don't know what it is that I won't have covered, and that's what's so frustrating. There'll be something on the day." But no, it went relatively smoothly. How we didn't have heart attacks, I don't know, but yeah, it's good.
Was there anything? I know it must have been hard because you were the organizer, but was there anything that you learned personally from this year's event, or a speaker that surprised you that they did something? I mean, admittedly, you probably saw what their presentation was ahead of time, but sort
Yeah,
of
well,
people that
I,
surprised you with what they talked about and the things you learned from that.
yeah, I mean, I did. I like to consider that I'm learning all the time. There was so much good stuff that came out. The two that stuck in my mind. One was Natalie Moores, who I've just met many years ago. Nat and Jess run a marketing agency called Mac and More, and I just got on with them years ago. And when you just like meet people on the internet, and then you kind of like, oh hi, and then you meet in real life, and you're like, oh, you're nice, and you get it immediately, kind of thing. Completely different kind of worlds and backgrounds, but I've always liked her character and the way she approaches things. And I emailed just saying, "Oh, just doing something weird. I get involved," and she was like, "Yes." And then she does poetry as well, and I wanted to blend that into the what she did, and she really took that kind of the creative side of the brief on, and it worked really well. At one point, she had like 10 or 12 copywriters on stage, each writing a line of poetry about Fix Fest and what have you, but also managed to blend that into how you saw poetry being enacted in modern advertising and stuff like that. So that was a really nice talk, and her energy and what have you. I think she probably was like, "Oh God, there's all these huge big names speaking," and though she should be considered among them, she probably doesn't. But it was nice to see her kind of smash it and really like own the stage and do that. So that was really good. And then a copywriter from I'd probably say Nat's from the kind of agency side branding world, and then a copywriter from the or rather the indirect world, and then the direct world, chap called Kane Smith, who does some work with us generally. But I hope he don't mind me saying this if he's listening, but he sent his talking to us and was like, "Dude, like you're gonna die if you do that talk. Like it's not right. It's kind of you it wasn't that it wasn't right. It's just that it I think it was the first time he'd probably done a talk like that in public, and he'd overloaded it, which is what I find that most people do. Anyway, we gave him some advice, some things, and just didn't say you've got to do X, you can do whatever you want, but gave him some advice. He went away, and then the talk that he gave was absolutely phenomenal. And it was just watching a guy who knows his skills, knows where he sits in the market, really thinks deeply about copy, and he really enunciated some, or he kind of he expressed some quite abstract ideas about where a lot of, especially freelance copywriters, when you go through all the gumph on LinkedIn, and it's all kind of nonsense about specializing this or niching down on this and all this kind of stuff. He spoke very well about copywriting as a skill, which I thought was great, and it was just great to see his speech where I'd be like, "Oh God, like, are you going to make it alive?" He absolutely performed really well, and I think he probably made a lot of new followers on that day because it was really good. So those two were good for me because it had that full creative side, and I saw how you can be so creative, but also you can be so practical as well, which was really good. And then, it sticks in my mind, Mark Ford, who was one of my mentors originally. He flew over from America very kindly to be one of the keynotes, but he was talking about the three pleasures in life, a kind of learning, sharing, and like learning, teaching yourself stuff, like doing stuff and actually doing something you love, and then sharing that skill, which is very trite, but it's kind of true. And you realize as you get older that the most trite kind of stuff is the most useful and insightful. But those that's what sticks in my mind. But there was a lot more. I've not even mentioned like Lee Davis, who does the design for us. He did a talk, which is fantastic. Yeah, there was stuff. Annabelle Ford and Kelly Brown, two American copywriters, did fantastic talks. Yeah, it was very good.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds it. I mean, would you say it's fair to say that, I don't know, it kind of feels like it's a sort of a professional community, somewhere between that and some sort of professional development, I don't know, cohort or something, like
Yeah,
what your
well,
sort of what you're running is, what you're the head of is?
yeah, this is me. I'm in danger. You'll have to hold me back from over philosophizing, but I've got a personal view, and it is a personal view. It's just me, Glenn Fisher. I think there's a problem in copywriting, has been marginalized in the advertising industry. I think copywriters and the definition of what a copywriter is has been so kind of watered down and divided into so many different kind of spurious elements. You write content, or no, I'm a brand copywriter, or I'm this copywriter, and all this kind of stuff. And I think it's been kind of hijacked by various other elements of the industry, and it's left. And naturally, writers tend to be quite insecure, introverted people anyway. So that has doubled how bad it is, that you've got this kind of cohort, as you say, of people wandering around a little bit shy, a little bit worried, a little bit kind of left to just do the words in quotation marks at the end of a thing, or just provide some content, or just, oh, we need this for that kind of ad that goes out. And that element, I've not been able to kind of provide any proof or evidence it's out there. But I think that is a massive, massive failing of business generally in the advertising world, on both sides, on direct response and indirect, in branding and in the world I'm more familiar with. And the reason it's such a failing that a copywriter will just do the words at the end is because copywriting is really about ideas. And if you're not involving the writer in the earlier stages, in the stages of strategy, in design, in the business as a whole, and allowing your copywriter to speak to the customer service team and find out what your customers talking about, what's the language they use, what are the ideas and what are the emotions they feel, and what annoys them. If you're not allowing your copywriter to get involved at that early stage and be as creative as they can be, you're kind of stunting the ability for your copy to be as good as it can be. So that's my long way around of I, rather than trying to empower or tell the businesses off and say, you need to do this, I'm trying to kind of empower copywriters and get them to see their true power. Oh, it sounds a bit silly, but their true role and the true impact they can have, and what they're really about. I do a thing. One of the things we do is the Fix. We go around the country and do social nights, social events, and we invite copywriters to come and spend time with us and chat. And 9 times out of 10, every single one, I'll have not an argument, but a debate with someone who calls themselves, maybe they'll go, oh, I'm not a copywriter like you. I just do content. I just do blogs and case studies and all this kind of stuff. Well, I go, well, what's the aim of that blog? It's like, oh, to convince this person to read more about the brand and all this stuff, and persuade them to eventually buy this. And I go, so you don't think that's copywriting? That is all part of the sales process. You are involved in that. you can as much call yourself a copywriter as the person who does the fancy, cool advert that gets the vote on Cannes Lions or whatever kind of thing. But it's this divisive nature of where everybody is. I think that's why so often you'll see stuff, debates about creativity being stunted these days, and what have you, because we're just not allowing copywriters to be the creative forces they can be. So I'm trying in my very small way, very half-assed way, to empower copywriters and get them to realize, no, we can make a difference. We literally like are the ones who are dealing with the communication with the actual words. So we can kind of change things if we want to.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Cannes Lion, and obviously they introduced a new category of humor coming up. And I was reading a drum article from 2021 that I was reading it the other day, but it was from 2021, and it said long copy is back. I don't know if it likes to come back every few years or so, or whatever. It's a bit like the 2000s fashions are back or something.
Yeah.
But so long copy and humor, and humor involves writers. You have to write jokes. You have to write a script. You have to write a punchline and timing and stuff. You have to write that stuff. It doesn't just appear. How do you feel the state of I mean, you sort of mentioned it already, but how do you feel the state of the copywriting industry is? And maybe looking ahead, do things like, I don't know, long copy and humor give you hope, or do you just roll your eyes?
I do tend to roll my. I have to be careful. I am getting a bit older and longer. But no, there's two things. So let's divide it into the first of all, just on humor. Humor can sell. The reason humor sells is that it's emotions. Like we sell on emotions, and whatever emotion. Typically, we go for fear and greed and love and power and all that kind of stuff. But if you can make your reader laugh, or what make you're halfway there to engaging with them on an emotional level. So humor can work. It can't work in every situation, and you don't always want humor there, kind of thing. I don't know if I want my accountant to be funny. I want them to like do my accounts correctly, and make sure I don't get arrested or something. But the humor can work in the same way any other emotion can work. So whenever I see these debates, I'm a bit like, yeah, okay, someone in the content offices has got bored and not creative, and they're trying to like, oh, we'll do this new category. Oh, yeah, whatever. Then that kind of picks up into what I'd probably say about the element of long copy being back and all this kind of stuff. I'm almost guarantee that when Cannes Lions talk about long copy being back, they probably refer to like an uncommon advert that has more than 100 words on a poster. And it's, to me, that is not long copy. That is not what I talk about when I talk about long copy. Long copy is a 5,000 word sales letter that is mailed to someone, or a 1 hour sales video that has a host that talks the audience through a sales argument, and asks them to purchase something at the end. What I would say there is that actually evidences to some extent how flirty do I want to be? I'll be flirty. Why not? I am getting older in my life. I would say it shows the arrogance of the advertising industry and the likes of Cannes Lions and all of these kind of things, that they have so little awareness of the long copy direct response world that was hailed by the likes of David Ogilvy and the names that they would probably like to associate with. David Ogilvy famous said that he wouldn't employ anyone in his agency unless they'd spent 2 years in direct response marketing. The reason for that is because direct response marketing and long copy in those terms is measurable. You can see what you've sold, and therefore you can change the copy and see, does this copy work better than that copy? The fact that they don't acknowledge that, the fact that there is unsexy adverts going out there making millions and millions of pounds for businesses in all areas and industries, but it will never be, and bear in mind, I understand, because I mean, no one wants to like present that like a big long sales letter at a fancy Parisian um, night where everybody's dressed up in fancy things. It's much easier to hail the latest TikTok star doing a parody of like what it's like to live in an agency kind of thing. That stuff will not get talked about because it's hard. It's dead hard, and it's not. It's about selling. It's about the deeper stuff. Um, I do not believe it is any better. I believe stuff makes like in the branding world is very good, and some of those adverts are exciting, and they change our lives, and we remember them. And everybody now talks about a John Lewis advert. Like, what? I mean, what's going on? It's insane that that can have an effect. I'm really interested in that, but I do think there is a certain it's a certain shame that I wonder how many people in those industries are really interested about what's actually selling and working rather than just what is in like a bit fun and a bit frivolous to talk about. So yeah, so that's my grumpy. I'm very aware of that grumpy and thing I am there, and probably bitter, and probably like I want to be invited to these things, but it's not how it works. But I think that kind of evidence is where there's a huge missed opportunity. I think I saw like Rory Sutherland recently in some clips saying about how kind of marketers have figured out a good way to monetize marketing, whereas copywriters haven't figured out to monetize copy or something along those lines. And I kind of understand that to some extent, but yeah, I think there's a massive missed opportunity. We spend too much time looking for quick fixes when actually everything we already need to know was probably written about in 1920 by some like boring old advertising man. But we just don't have the discipline to actually follow that kind of stuff. But that's a very long and rambly answer, which probably evidences my addiction to long copy. But yeah.
It's okay. I mean, it sounded like boss level copy, sort of 5,000 word essays. But I know we're actually almost out of time. So a couple of questions I want to see if I can cram in with. Yep. I don't know how easy they are to cram.
I'll do short copy. I'll go into branding mode and just
there you go, TikTok mode.
Three word headlines.
Well, I wanted to ask you briefly about songwriting, because I've seen a couple of ads in recent times. I don't know if you've seen the Yorkshire Teas "Pack Your Bags" song, for example. If not, I'll send you a link. But it's a whole song, verses, choruses, etc. It's like 3 minutes long, and I wonder how much in your career have you got involved in that sort of thing? I mean, do copywriters write songs for brands? Like, I mean, that was probably a thing back in the day. I don't know, a long time ago, maybe. But and you're obviously you're not saying you're that old.
Yeah, but, I've got a musical background. I play bass in bands and toured the country for many years, and so I have a very musical approach to the way I craft copy. But that your question is probably more about is that the fact that does that work? Is that what copywriters do? I believe a copywriter can lend their skill set to almost any form of expression. Have I written a song for copy? Well, I've written jingles for the old podcast. I once wrote a parody of a street song about SEO and something to do with Simon Sinek. I can't remember what that was thing. And they are remembered, and so I understand. I think the idea of writing jingles and stuff. I mean, that again, it's not new that people write songs to persuade people to take action because that's. If you get a nice ditty in your head and you remember it, and when you're in the shop and you think, right, which product shall I buy today? You remember that ditty and you buy that one. It's hopefully leans you towards that. I think it probably the lyrics, the actual words, the copywriter would be worth involving, but it goes back to the other side, which perhaps I was unfair in saying, is that copywriters should be involved in those early stages of creation. But also they can't do it in isolation. The best work is always done when you've got a copywriter, a designer. In this case, you'd probably need someone who has musical knowledge and knows how to piece together a song. So I think so long as you've got all of those people working together, ultimately focusing on the two important things, which is the product you're selling and the person you're selling it to. So long as you keep them at either side of the kind of spectrum, and you put the right team of people in the middle of it, anything can work. And I think any group of creative people, whether your particular skill is copy or music or design or what have you, can put together a decent jingle.
That makes sense. My final question, I'm sort of reluctant to ask it because it's a big question, but maybe we can sort of do it in a snappy way.
Yeah.
We'll see. But I just wondered, how worried are you about the whole sort of AI coming for copywriters, or is that sort of on a very basic level? And actually, it's a very easy argument to say if you want the human touch, you need to employ a human, and if you want basic copy, yeah, you can probably use AI for it. Is that
So
what you
I
tend
can
to
answer
say?
that. That is the one I can answer in a very pithy way. I'm not worried
Okay.
at all.
Okay,
Not
fair
worried
enough.
at all.
Good, good.
I couldn't give a two hoots about it. It's an absolute misnomer. It will be a technology that's used in the same way as Word is used, or Google Docs. I still use Word. I don't. Most people use Google Docs because it's probably easier and better and quicker. I'm just an old-fashioned. It's just a tool. Some more clever copywriters might start using it to emulate stuff. The business owner who chooses to exclusively use that to create their copy will very quickly get into a bad place. It will, like everything, it will adapt. That's what happens in life. That's why it's worth listening to history podcasts and reading philosophy, because all of this stuff has been done before. We things move forward and change. I think the AI thing is more a concern of LinkedIn people needing something to talk about. I don't see it as a problem, and certainly not a worry. Aside from the same way you worry about any new silly consultant that comes in and goes, "Let's try this shiny thing exclusively as our solution to our problems." That's not the shiny thing. That's the problem. It's the person recommending it is the problem.
Yeah, I suppose it makes sense. And marketers, the marketing industry does tend to like fixate on a thing every year or two that's a new shiny thing. So, and whether they're worrying about it or they want to see if they can use it in some way, it tends to be a form of technology, it seems. But I mean, we will be exploring that as a magazine because we have to. But
I think it's fair to explore it. But I think my point being is that it's not a thing to fear. It's a thing to understand, to take the advantages of. No one's advertising on MySpace at the moment. Like that's dead. But I'm sure at one point everybody would have been trying to advertise on MySpace. We now move to Facebook, to Instagram, to these things. The platforms all kind of tend to change and what have you, and the way we use technology will change and evolve through time. AI will be used in some way. It will be used by copywriters. It will be used by advertisers. Our privacy policy on our homepage is written by AI because I can't be asked to write a privacy policy, kind of thing. So efficiencies can be found, but will it stop the need for creative people? No.
I think that's a nice ray of hope on which to wrap up. I think there's always going to be a need for creative writers in the industry, and also we look forward to all the things going on with Fix Fest next year. Buy the merch, all that sort of stuff.
Right, well, we gave it away for free.
Okay, no merch. Forget the merch.
We will maybe that will be one of the things we learn this year, to try and recoup some expenses by selling the beautiful t-shirts and caps and stickers. But no, we probably won't, knowing us. We want to do robes, and we also, if anybody out there listening runs a craft beer business, we do want to do a craft beer, a Fix beer as well. So get in touch.
Nice.
Before I come to find you.
That sounds cool. That sounds like a threat now, but yeah, fair enough. Oh, well, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the Media Cat Magazine podcast. We've had a great discussion.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Good talk to you, mate.